Universality of discrimination and subordination. Good evening, friends. You are most welcome to Civil Affairs channel. Today we are going to discuss Social Anthropology by Maan IGNOU, mane004. Here we will discuss gender and society. Let us begin the topic. The discipline of anthropology since its inception has been concerned with the dichotomy of local and global, ideographic and nomothetic, and universal and particular. This dichotomy in the beginning helped in explaining the evolution of society by locating the particular against the notion of the universal. To some extent, any discipline that claims to be scientific in outlook must possess a universal generalizing character that can be law generating. In this respect, anthropologists have always advocated micro level studies and macro level implication. Micro level studies with macro level implications, which in turn helps in locating cross cultural studies in a broader theoretical framework. The notion of gender discrimination and its universality also reflects the basic tension of the discipline. Another dichotomy that helps in understanding the universal character of discrimination is that of public domain and domestic domain. It has been argued that patriarchal ideology has divided the entire world into two specific domains with specific rules and regulations. The public domain is largely meant for the male members of the society where they can negotiate their roles and establish their supremacy over the second sex. On the other hand, domestic domain is largely restricted to the female where they work as primary caregivers. In the domestic domain, however, women are not entitled to take decisions pertaining to family matters, which is largely taken by the males. Purkayastha et al. 2003. This dichotomous view has been criticized sometimes for being Western in outlook. It is said that it originated in the Western modernized world and has been generalized to other societies without taking into account the specificities in those societies. This calls for a revisit to the entire debate of public domestic domain and take a relook through the lens of ideographic, particularistic, contextual knowledge, which has become a hallmark of anthropology since the advent of functional paradigm and reinstated in the postmodern ideology, through, though not entirely but partially. Karen Brodkin Sachs breaks the monotony of universality by exemplifying the Iroquois society where the dichotomy of domestic public is not found and women enjoy an enormous amount of decision making power in domestic, political, religious, and economic spheres of life. Sachs 1970. Similarly, Leacock has shown that among the matrilineal native Northern American Montagnais Nascapi, the division of labor between male and female members of the society is such that women are not dependent on their husbands. Leacock 1981. Their economy is based on reciprocal division of labor between the sexes. In such societies, there is no hierarchical division between the public sphere and domestic sphere. Both the sexes produce goods that are necessary for livelihood. The above mentioned examples and many other similar cases reported by different scholars have revealed that there are societies where social relations are based on the principle of egalitarianism and men and women are placed equally in terms of their contribution to the society. However, even such cases do not account for superiority of women over men, and the egalitarianism mentioned is only partial and not total. Our next heading is the status of women in tribal societies. It is a general conception that tribal societies are more egalitarian than the non tribal societies or caste societies in the special context of India. It is a fact that The tribal societies are not stratified on the basis of caste, but one might ask that what is the position of women in such societies and how it is different from other non tribal societies? The answer to such questions are rather tricky but by no means straightforward. Considering the ethnic diversity in India, tribe is not a homogeneous category, rather, it is a heterogeneous based on language, geographical area, physical features, social organization, etc. This heterogeneity stops us from giving a sweeping answer about the position of women in these societies. If one wants to understand the position of women in these societies, then one must understand that how work is divided between the sexes, who owns that work, and to what extent it is considered important by the society. A sheer division of work between male and female members of the society does not mean that women will be treated unequally, but the importance that is accorded to that work is more suggestive. It has been argued that position of women in societies with different economic and social organization is different. Those societies where hunting and food gathering or shifting cultivation is the basic source of sustenance accord better status and autonomy to women since collecting forest produce is considered important for sustenance. Also, women in such societies are more autonomous since they have control over some resources and its distribution. As societies progressed from hunting gathering to settled agricultural status of women started deteriorating since the ownership of land and its transfer followed the principle of lineage and such lineages were dominated by males. As Eagles has rightly pointed out that the world's historic defeat of women at the hands of men began with the emergence of private property. In this context, tribal societies must also be seen as societies in transition or transformation since they came in contact with the so called outside world. This has led to the emergence of the concept of private property instead of common property resources and dowry in place of bride price, which in turn led to deteriorating women's status. D. N. Mazumdar, 1988. Apart from the economic determinant of women's status in the society, the social structure and organization in a tribal society provides more autonomy to the women. Some tribes in the central India had an institution of youth dormitory. It is known by different names in different tribes, like it is called Dumkeria among the Orons, Giti-Ora among the Mundas, and Ghotul among the Gonds. Such youth dormitories functioned as institutions where boys and girls could mix freely. They were a part of their socialization process where they learned their gender specific roles, duties, and reciprocity in behavior while dealing with the opposite sex. This also regulated the behavior between men and women and generated a sense of unity among them in society. Pre-mixing of boys and girls before marriage was never seen as a taboo in these communities. Bodra, 2008. Activity: collect more such examples from societies around you and discuss with your friends. Such autonomy is also visible among the Bhil tribes where the institution of marriage has certain provisions that accord for greater autonomy for girls and lesser restrictions and taboo. Bhils are famous for Bhagoria marriage where boys and girls elope together and when they return they are considered to be husband and wife after paying certain amount called dapa by groom side to the bride side. Such kinds of marriage largely take place during the festival of Holi, the festival of colors. Such festivals are marked with greater intermixing of young people who then choose their life partners. They should be compared with the autonomy and restrictions placed on the women in the larger society where arranged intra-caste marriages are the norm, and their deviance from the norm is met with dire consequences in the form of honor killings. Here, one represents here Dapa. In case of Dapa, that is the bright side. As per the primary data gathered during the fieldwork among the Bhils of Jhabua district of Madhya Pradesh. Next, we will discuss. Scholars have argued that tribal women also had certain rights over the land. The rights of unmarried daughters, wives, and widows are clearly spelled out. These rights were largely of two types. First is in the form of having the right to manage a certain piece of land, and second is in the form of having a claim or share in whatever the land produced. These kinds of rights gave some autonomy to women in terms of managing and accumulating resources. In this context, the position of widow in a tribal society is different from the one in Hindu society. In tribal society, a widow continues to contribute both in the field and forest, and thus are able to generate independent income by selling forest produce or working on the field. This is in contrast to the traditional Hindu society where a widow is considered inauspicious, and is barred from doing any work and mixing with the society at large and barred from doing any work and mixing with the society at large. However, this situation has changed in the recent times, and after several reforms in colonial and post-colonial era related to widow rights and obligations. With the advent of British rule, the position of tribal women and their rights in the landed property underwent a change, which was a result of British policy vis-a-vis land, Bodhra 2008. The argument centering the subjugation and subordination of women also holds true in some of the matrilineal tribal societies, although the position of women in matrilineal societies are much better than that of their patrilineal counterparts, Dubey 2009. But the ideology of patriarchy and unequal power distribution is a reality that contradicts a very naive understanding of matrilineal tribal societies. Tiplu Nongbri, while discussing the transformation in gender relations in the context of Khasi women of northeast India, has highlighted the fact that position of women in these societies is comparatively better, but they are still not free from subjugation and subordination. It is in the politico-jural domain that men assert their power, which gives rise to a kind of political structure that excludes women. Men even use their position to generate a kind of ideology that is based on a hierarchical relationship between men and the women. This kind of ideological churning is taking place with the help of state apparatuses that are being used to distort the matrilineal system. It has also been argued that traditionally women were not allowed to take part in the political domain of decision making. Nongbri 2000. This is quite evident from the fact that women have been traditionally denied the membership of Khasi Durbar, Agnihotri 2012. The case of matrilineal Nayars. Matrilineal is also found among the Nayars of Kerala. Kathleen Go and other scholars like C.J. Fuller have provided a detailed anthropological account of how matrilineal is practiced and perpetuated among the Nayars. Snyder and Go 1961, Fuller 1976, Go 1952. In this matrilineal organization, women were not dependent upon their husbands as they are the members of a matrilineal group known as Tarawad. A Tarawad consists of members belonging to the same matrilineal. The institution of marriage among the Nayars is characterized by Tali Ketu Kalyanam and Sambandhanam relationships. Tali Ketu Kalyanam is a ceremonial tali, gold necklace, tying tying rituals, necklace tying ritual that marks the transition of a girl into a ceremonial martial alliance with a male member of the Inangar linked lineage, like Mangalsutra. After this ceremony, the girl is permitted to have several sexual unions with the other male members of the Inangar who were also considered as visiting husbands. Children born out of such Sambandhanam unions belong to the mother's Tarawad. Even the dissolution of Sambandhanam relationship was easy and was not looked down upon. Widowhood was not considered inauspicious, and divorce and remarriage can easily take place without any social stigma attached to it. However, this kind of unique kinship and marriage patterns were located parallel to the socio-cultural matrix of high caste patrilineal Hindus and people from other religions. People from such communities do not approve of these relations and kinship patterns, as they used to look at the practice of Sambandhanam with disdain and disapproval. Many Nair men with Western ideas and education were also skeptical about their institution. It is in this context that Sara Damoni has tried to understand the changing position of women among the Nairs and the transformation of matrimony. She has argued that the Nair men were made to feel inferior and uncivilized by people who looked down upon the practice of visiting husband. This led Nair men to bring about certain changes in their institution to make them coterminous with the ideology of the West and other patrilineal communities. This so-called Western and progressive ideology is based on the principle that after marriage a woman and her children become the responsibility of her husband, and the husband is obliged to look after his family. This is different from the nice institution where the Tarawad is responsible for the maintenance of women and her children. From the perspective of women, such changes resulted into subordination and subjugation of women in the matrilineal institution setup of the Nairs. Sara Damoni, 1999. It has also been argued in the context of status of women that we should not always talk and analyze in terms of low or high status of women in a society. Thus, a dichotomous understanding in this context is not called for. There are also intermediary statuses in various societies depending upon rights and privileges accorded to women. It is for sure that in most of the societies across the world, the status of women is not as good as that of men, and especially in the patriarchal societies, it is even worse. Patriarchal societies impose certain restrictions and taboos that need to be followed by women in order to get the label of good women. The construction of gender in the cultural context. This section will deal with the question that how socialization as a process is linked with gender based discrimination and subordination. When we say that something is ingrained in our culture or society at the level of its basic structure, then we must also realize that this culture and structures get reproduced over generation after generation. Changes in cultural traits and social structures do occur either from within the society or forced and adopted from outside. However, for a very long period, these changes coexist with the older or traditional patterns and show a special difference in their manifestation. This is quite evident in the context of rural urban patterns that reflect this kind of coexistence to the some degree. Socialization is a process through which we learn our cultural values, traits, customs, and rituals. We also learn behavior patterns that are accepted and legitimized in the larger societal context. In this context, gender specific roles are learned both at home and outside. This learning is largely observational in nature, and both genders internalize the kind of behavior they receive, which is later projected in their own behavior. Leela Dubey, one of the pioneers in the field of gender studies, had discussed about the construction and consolidation of gender identity. She is of the view that in a patriarchal, patrilineal society like ours in India, gender roles start taking shape very early in life. The difference in the enthusiasm of parents at the birth of male and female child is keenly observed by the female child and is internalized, which becomes part of her psyche. Later in life, she observes her mother, grandmother, and other female members in the society and try to become like them in order to gain acceptance in the family and in the society at large. The very notion of women being pariah dhan, someone else's property, that is largely held in our patriarchal society also contributes towards constructing the gender identity that leads to discrimination and subordination. A woman is never regarded as a permanent member of her natal family as she has to leave that family and move to her husband's house. This gives rise to the belief that she will never contribute to the family income and instead she will take away certain part of the family income as her dowry. In contrast, a male child is considered to be the savior of the family and as a permanent member of the family, one who will contribute towards the family income and take care of aging parents. Such expected roles and identity formation leads to a stratified system where gender is placed in a hierarchical pattern. Dubai 1988. The objective reality and subjective experience. It is an objective reality that women are being discriminated against and treated as subordinates in the society. This fact gets reflected in the child sex ratio across the country of India. As per the census report of 2011, the child sex ratio in the age group of 0 to 6 years is just 914 girls per thousand boys. This is more alarming in the context of the decadal decline in this ratio, which was 976 in 2001. Even in states like Maharashtra, which are still considered as progressive and where other development indicators are better than many other states in India, yet the child sex ratio stands at the meager 883 girls per thousand boys. In 2001, this ratio was 913. To understand the meaning of this ratio better, it should be kept in mind that as per the global trends, a normal child sex ratio should be above 950. Therefore, this is an objective indicator of gender discrimination and preferential sex selection in the favor of male child. Kata Kam 2012. Now one may ask that how this discrimination is manifested in lived experience of women. Do women really feel that they are being discriminated? What difference do they observe in terms of their experience in the treatment that they receive from family members? Such questions became part of a study that tried to understand the subjective experience of women vis-a-vis discrimination. The basic premise behind this study was the fact that what we believe has occurred to us is more significant than what has actually happened. This premise works at a psychological level where our perception of reality is more significant than the reality itself. Therefore, it is important to know that what women perceive has happened with them in terms of discrimination and subordination. It has been found in the study that there is a gap between the objective reality and the subjective experience of that reality. This study was conducted among the girls between the age of 7 and 18. These girls belong to the 600 rural and urban households in 8 different states in India. When they were asked that is there any gender based discrimination that they face, Then the answer was mostly no. They did not report any difference between boys and girls with respect to healthcare and food either. No difference was reported in terms of rewards and punishments given to boys and girls. In the domain of education, also more than 70% believed that education is equally important for both boys and girls. One may wonder that instead of the objective discrimination evident in the statistical data, the subjective experience is not in sync with it. Sudhir Kakar and Katharina Kakar, in their celebrated book, The Indian's Portrait of a People, gives a possible explanation for such a discrepancy. They are of the view that such discrimination is not directly transformed into behavior and is filtered and diluted through the institution of family, where a girl child finds herself in a situation where one or more adult members of the family is sympathetic and loving in their behavior and attitude towards the girl. This is perceived and memorized as instances contrary to the patriarchal dominating and discriminatory values. Also, existence of a sphere of femininity and domesticity gives women an opportunity to be productive and lively. To be productive and lively. This sphere includes other women in the household, and it is here that women negotiate meaning of discrimination and subordination, and their reaction towards discrimination gets diluted. However, in folklore, ballads, and wedding songs, women do react against discrimination by portraying men as faithless. Kakar and Kakar 2007. Gender subordination and vulnerability in emergency situations, new frontiers in anthropological research. The discourse on gender discrimination and subordination has found some new grounds in emerging subfields of the anthropology of disasters. This new area of research tries to understand that how gender subordination leads to increased vulnerabilities in emergency situations. Disasters are seen not only in terms of hazardous climatic and man-made situations but are also largely understood as socio-economic, cultural, and political vulnerabilities that are inbuilt in the societal structure. This view gives rise to a new understanding and analysis of women and their status in society and how this affects their vulnerability during and after natural or man made calamities. A study was conducted by a group of anthropologists in the flood affected district of Bahraich in eastern Uttar Pradesh. It was a case control study where levels of anxiety, depression, and stress was measured among the flood affected and non affected population. What was the study of? Group of anthropologists. This study was a part of European Union 6 framework MICRODIS MICRODIS project entitled Integrated Health, Social and Economic Impacts of Extreme Events, Evidence, Methods and Tools. A group of anthropologists headed by Professor P.C. Joshi, Asia Coordinator of MICRODIS, and Professor of Anthropology, University of Delhi, conducted fieldwork in Bahraich district of Uttar Pradesh. It was found that in the flood affected zone, the level of anxiety and depression and stress was more among the females than in the males. The underlying reason for such a disparity was found embedded in the relative status of women in the society. The patriarchal system has clearly laid down rules for women and is almost restricted to their domestic domain. The main task of women is to feed their children and take care of the household. Looking from the feminist Looking from a feminist political ecological perspective, women are seen as primary resource users and managers, and in terms of the responsibilities they have towards the dependents in the household and community. Ruchalio, Thomas Slater, and Wangarai, 1996. This argument finds basis in the light of data collected from FGD's focused group discussion among the women of flood affected area. Jum explains name of the participant. Men go out in order to feel some change, but the mothers are the ones whom children want. As a man and a father, no one ever goes to the extent of seeking help at the cost of his self respect, but women will not be able to withstand the hunger and plight of her children, hence, she would even beg for them in spite of being abused and ridiculed. Her only aim is to feed her children at the cost of her self esteem. To this summer, another participant of the focus group discussion FGD further adds, there are times when the troubles of women are more than that of the men because men do not have to look after the basic needs of children like where to feed them, what to feed them, where to make them sleep. This exemplifies that how women's subordination increases their vulnerability in the context of disaster. This is another objective reality of gender based discrimination and subordination and has obvious consequences for the well being of women in special circumstances and for the society at large. Khatri et al. 2012. At the last, we will discuss the summary. Summary part is discrimination and subordination as linked concept. These two terms are complementary to each other. Subordination implies the action of subordinating or creating a hierarchy or strata. It can be argued that subordination validates discrimination. Therefore, subordination becomes a tool or an ideological basis for discrimination. The very process of primary and secondary socialization in our society clearly demarcates gender specific roles and hence creates a divide between the public and domestic domains. These two domains need to mix together. Women are actively coming forward in the public domain, and it's time for men to move towards the domestic domain and do not consider it something exclusively for women. It is only with this kind of sharing that we can achieve the goal of gender equality. Gender based discrimination is a universal phenomenon with some exceptions where the status of women is to some extent equal with that of the men. In the case of tribal societies in India and elsewhere, as we have seen in the examples above that women have greater autonomy in these societies, we should also try to learn from these examples. Throughout this unit, we have seen that gender discrimination and subordination are embedded at the socio-structural level. The idea of gender equality enshrined in our constitution has not been fully realized. Even today, we hear news of gender based discrimination in the form of sex selective abortions, female infanticides, domestic violence, molestations, rape, etc. As responsible citizens of this country, it is our duty to stop such discriminatory and criminal behavior. The first step towards this goal is to realize and understand the kinds of discrimination that are prevalent in our society and then to act accordingly. The need of the hour is to discard the patriarchal mindset and start thinking in a rational and scientific manner. Thank you very much.